Hello everyone, welcome to the program. I'm Joke Rogers here in Lagos. We begin with the Israeli airstrikes on the Jabalia refugee camp in northern Gaza, which has left hundreds of Palestinians killed. According to eyewitnesses, at least 4 Israeli missiles struck 3 buildings inside the Jabalia refugee camp last night, with Hamas health officials saying 20 to 30 people are believed to be trapped beneath the rubble of the 3 buildings. Jabalia is the biggest camp in the north of Gaza, and the Israeli military has been operating in and around the camp over the past 2 weeks. Separately, 2 Palestinians were killed by the Israeli army in the West Bank city of Jenin. The Palestinian Health Ministry also confirmed that a 3rd man was reported to have died of wounds he sustained a few days ago. While there has been no comments from the Israeli military, a spokesperson said it was looking into the report and will issue a statement once it has more information. And there's yet another tunnel discovery by the Israeli forces battling Hamas, but this time they're claiming to have uncovered an unusually large concrete and iron-girded tunnel designed to carry carloads of militant fighters from Gaza right up to the border. The tunnel ran down diagonally to a depth of 50 meters, where it expanded to 3 meters in height and width with electrical fittings. Chief Military Spokesperson Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari put the full length of the tunnel at 4 kilometers, enough to reach into northern Gaza City, once the heart of Hamas governance and now a devastated combat zone. Generally, the tunnels shown by the Israeli military after their discovery have been narrow and low, designed for single-file movement of gunmen on foot. The tunnel shown by Mr. Hagari had shafts plunging vertically downward that he said suggested it was part of a wider network.
We found in Gaza the biggest secret of Sinwar, his project, his subterranean tunnel project. We're going to enter. It was a secret that we have revealed that was meant to target the crossing.
In the meantime, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has vowed to fight till the end as new negotiations appear to be underway to recover hostages held by Hamas after a source said Israel's intelligence chief met the Prime Minister of Qatar, a country mediating in the conflict. In his opening remarks at the start of a weekly cabinet meeting in Tel Aviv, Mr. Netanyahu read from a page of what he said was a letter he received from families of fallen soldiers saying continuing the war against Hamas in Gaza was their will. Mr. Netanyahu told a press conference the war in Gaza was existential and must be fought until victory. In the meantime, Israeli and Palestinian representatives to the United Nations have made their case in favor of and against the ceasefire before the General Assembly. Comments from the ambassador to the Permanent Observer Mission of the State of Palestine, Riyad Mansour, and the Israeli representative to the UN, Gilad Erdan, come after the General Assembly passed a resolution on Tuesday calling for a ceasefire. The resolution had 153 countries voting in favor of and 23 abstaining. The US and Israel, which argue that a ceasefire only benefits Hamas, voted against the measure along with 8 other countries.
Those attempting to shame those who call for a humanitarian ceasefire, you have failed. The General Assembly spoke. The world spoke. 153 countries spoke. Shame is on those who refuse to stand against atrocities.
Thank you, Mr. President.
There is no way to end the massacres of civilians, including children, at an unprecedented pace, to address the occupation-made humanitarian catastrophe of unprecedented scale, except through a ceasefire.
The amendment distorts the essential aim.
It also targets our present and future, killing engineers and doctors, and poets and academics. It also targets those who could document the crimes and inform the world, the journalists. We mourn one of those journalists, Samer Abu Dagga, wounded in an Israeli drone strike and left to bleed to death for 6 hours, while ambulances were prevented from reaching him.
I should like to thank the distinguished
Stop the genocide committed against the Palestinian people and their children.
A humanitarian ceasefire means a terrorist-saving ceasefire. We're not stupid. This resolution only seeks an end to the war against Hamas Nazis. Sorry for the words. You don't give a damn about Israel and our future. An end to the war means turning our backs on the hostages. It means ensuring Hamas's continued rule in Gaza.
Thank you, sir.
All a ceasefire secures is a future for the genocidal jihadists. It is only Hamas that this resolution is defending. Stop hiding your intentions behind your suits and diplomatic wording. Humanitarian ceasefire. This resolution has a distorted agenda. At least make this clear to all member states. This resolution aims to keep Hamas in power, period.
President, Ireland Coast.
Hours ago, just hours ago, Hamas rocket was fired towards the vicinity of the Temple Mount, Haram el-Sharif. And the Iron Dome, Israel's Iron Dome, intercepted the missile and defended Al-Aqsa Mosque from Hamas. Think about this. Israel is defending Al-Aqsa Mosque from Hamas's missiles.
Meanwhile, U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin has arrived in Israel as international pressure for a ceasefire in Gaza intensifies. Talks are expected to focus on Israel's eventual end to its high-intensity war in Gaza and transition to a more limited, focused conflict. Mr. Austin, who is accompanied by the chairman of the U.S. military's Joint Chiefs of Staff, Air Force General Charles Brown Jr., met his Israeli counterpart, Yoav Gallant. Officials told reporters traveling with Mr. Austin that talks with Mr. Gallant would deal with Israel's plan for a transition to the next phase of the war, and that he planned to talk with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu about this. French Foreign Affairs Minister Catherine Colonna has also arrived in Israel for a one-day visit where she is expected to meet families of Israeli-French hostages held by Hamas in Gaza. Israeli-French Minister Eli Cohen welcomed his counterpart and thanked Ms. Colonna and French President Emmanuel Macron for their support for Israel. Ms. Colonna landed in Israel hours after the French Foreign Ministry said one of its workers had died as a result of wounds sustained during an Israeli attack in Rafah in the south of Gaza Strip, an attack France has condemned. The French Foreign Affairs Minister also met with her Palestinian counterpart Riyad al-Maliki in Ramallah, West Bank, to reiterate French calls for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza. And a top Palestinian Authority official says all factions, including Hamas, must take a serious look at the failure of their policies to achieve freedom for their people once the war between Israel and Hamas is over. 63-year-old Hussein al-Sheikh is the General Secretary of the President Mahmoud Abbas Palestinian Liberation Organization and is seen by some as a potential successor. His comments were the first time a senior PLO leader has talked publicly about Hamas tactics since the October 7 attacks, which triggered a ground war that has killed at least 19,000 Palestinians, displaced hundreds of thousands, and left much of the enclave in ruins. Mr. Sheikh also acknowledged that the political path under the Oslo Peace Accords was faltering and, as it currently stands, will not achieve the ambition of the Palestinian people for the establishment of a Palestinian state within pre-1967 borders. German Air Force has loaded relief material onto a cargo plane at a German military airport for onward delivery to the Cairo International Airport in Egypt as Israel opened the Gaza aid crossing for the first time as calls for a ceasefire grows. The German army said it received an order from the German Foreign Office on short notice and was happy to carry out the mission. According to the army spokesperson, Colonel Christian John, the cargo consists of a total of 8 intubators as well as ventilators for newborns and small children, 100 monitors for patients and other medical materials. The relief cargo will be received by the German embassy and delivered to hospitals in Egypt set to be treating patients from the Gaza Strip. And earlier, the World Health Organization welcomed the opening of the Kerem Shalom crossing into Gaza, but said work was still needed to ensure that essential medical supplies reached hospitals in dire need across the enclave. Speaking to reporters in Geneva via video link, WHO representative in Gaza, Dr. Richard Peppercorn described the opening as good news, but said there were hospitals that were difficult to reach in the north of the enclave that still needed essential medical supplies. It comes after Israel approved the entry of aid into the Gaza Strip through the Kerem Shalom crossing. The Israeli Prime Minister's office said in a statement the opening would allow Israel to maintain its commitments to permit the entry of 200 trucks of aid per day.
And that's, of course, very good news. So I think it's good news. But there's no, and I think what we now have to work on as well, how can we make sure that these trucks can go everywhere in Gaza? And not just in the south of Gaza, but also to the north of Gaza. How for WHO it means that there's still 3 hospitals barely functional in the north. Now how do we make sure that we can get regular supplies and even, by the way, help to expand the number of beds, get emergency medical teams linked to those places? At the moment, that is not possible because of the lack of security, the difficult routings, etc. So that should change. It's a welcoming news, etc. It will help. But we're not only talking about getting supplies into Gaza, we're talking about getting supplies to the people all over Gaza.
The UN simply cannot do our job. We cannot do our work right now because we are blocked and prevented from doing that work. We have restrictions on who we can have in the country. We can't get the aid in, and we have huge security access problems. You know that. You've been reporting on it for weeks. You've been reporting on it for weeks. So I think it's time that you went and asked some questions of some different sources as to why that situation prevails. Because it's not here you're going to get the answer to those questions. It's somewhere else, in another press conference, with other countries.
For the Gazans, I think they're right to be disappointed. They're right to be disappointed with the world in general first. They're right to be disappointed with the international community. And we are part of the international community, so of course they will be disappointed with us too. But if they're not disappointed, I would be surprised. We're trying our best. It's not enough. Or whatever they're getting, it's a fraction of what they should get.
Elsewhere, Canadian officials have charged a youth in Ottawa with terrorism offenses over alleged targeting of the Jewish community amid warnings of rising anti-Semitism from the war in the Middle East. According to a statement, the suspect was charged with facilitation of a terrorist activity by communicating instructional material related to an explosive substance and knowingly instructing directly or indirectly a person to carry out a terrorist activity against Jewish persons. Ottawa Mayor Mark Sutcliffe said there has been a rise in anti-Semitism in Ottawa in recent weeks, with police saying the youth's age prevented further release of information about the suspect or the plot.
Not long before the announcement was made publicly, and I don't know a lot more details than what's already been shared with the public, but I have heard in recent weeks updates from the police about the rise in anti-Semitism, yeah. And here in Ottawa we've been increasing patrols around synagogues and other Jewish institutions, as well as around other religious institutions in the community. So there's been an increase in Islamophobia as well, and there's been rising tensions, as there have been all over the world and throughout Canada, and we've been paying close attention to that to try to keep everybody in Ottawa safe. I'm in regular contact with religious leaders throughout the community, and I talk regularly with the police chief and with others in the police service to make sure that I'm up to date on what's happening, and we'll continue to keep the patrols around religious institutions, including synagogues and other Jewish institutions, as frequent as possible to make sure everyone in our community is safe. The tension, the fear among Jewish residents is very high. They're very concerned. And we have to show our support for them, and we have to show our support for all members of the community who are suffering because of the events that are happening in the Middle East. It's a very tense and dangerous time, and I think a lot of people in our city are really struggling. But we have to come together as a community. We can't let the events in the Middle East divide us. We can't contribute to the tensions and divisions. We have to reach out to each other and treat each other with kindness and respect, and put our arms around each other as a community and support each other in this difficult time.
And in Europe, hundreds marched through Barcelona over the weekend during a protest in solidarity with Palestinians. Many held Palestinian flags and participated in chants calling for Palestine to be freed. Spain, Ireland, Belgium and Malta want EU leaders to debate the situation in Gaza and have jointly called for a lasting humanitarian ceasefire that would end the conflict.
We need to keep on taking the streets in order to push our governments, to push politicians to end complicity with Israeli apartheid and with the massacres Israeli is committing against the Palestinian people. And specifically in the Spanish state, we're seeing that the Spanish government is being one of the voices that's being more critical about Israel's murder and massacre against the Palestinian people, but it's not enough.
Meanwhile, families and supporters of hostages still held in Gaza are demanding that Israel present an offer to Hamas leaders to return their loved ones unharmed. The freed hostage Raz Ben Ami said at a news conference that she warned the Israeli cabinet that the fighting in Gaza will harm the hostages. She adds that Israel must offer another hostage release deal and get the international community to back it. The families gathered in Tel Aviv a day after 3 hostages were mistakenly killed by Israeli forces in Gaza. More than 100 women, children, teens and foreigners were released in a deal struck in late November. Others have been declared dead by Israeli authorities. Officials say more than 100 hostages remain in Gaza.